Welcome to Body Matters podcast, where we bring to you raw and inspiring content on all things to do with body positivity and eating disorder recovery. So welcome to the Understanding Body Matters podcast number 2. Today we will be talking on all things to do with surviving Christmas with an eating disorder and the eating pressures that do come around with this time of year. I know that Christmas is such an amazing and joyful time of year for many, but unfortunately it is not the same for others. It can also be a period of guilt. It is a period where many that are suffering with an eating disorder can get anxious due to the many aspects that do come with Christmas, like the focus on the food. There are also many triggers that come with Christmas for some, such as eating in front of people, leftovers in the fridge, many things. So we are very excited to bring in our director and psychologist, Sarah McMahon, to provide some professional insight and advice for those who are anxious about this time of year, and advice for parents who might not know how to appropriately address these issues. Before going into this episode, I thought it would be a good idea to introduce the person behind the microphone, which is me. My name is Maddie. I am the host of the Understanding Body Matters podcast. I am also one of the operation managers and the marketing manager at BodyMatters Australasia. Some of you, if you are clients, would definitely have seen me before. You would definitely know who I am, but I thought I'd put a name to the voice. I absolutely love working at Body Matters. It is something that works very close to my heart, as body image growing up and eating disorders was something that worked very close around my group of circles and definitely with me. So it has always been a passion of mine to work in the mental health sector, but especially in the eating disorder and spreading awareness of eating disorders. So I'm very passionate about what I'm doing and I absolutely love it. So that's a bit of background about me. I also want to introduce a new segment that I want to implement on each podcast episode with myself and each guest that we have on board. And that is to discuss a challenge that you have faced that week and how you overcame that. And if you didn't have a challenge, what was a high of your week? So to start off with, one challenge that I had this week was I had a day where I just woke up really flat and just quite sad for some reason. I couldn't really put a pinpoint to it. And I just needed a good cry, to be honest. And I'm not one that is very good about talking about my emotions. It just doesn't ever come out right, but it is a flaw. I do need to definitely work on that. But how I overcame that was definitely bringing it up with my friend and letting her know that I wasn't okay. And that in itself definitely did help me, because it made me realize that it is okay to have off days and to not be okay sometimes. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to feel okay all the time and put on this hard front every time or every day, but it's definitely not realistic. And yeah, I'm feeling a lot better now that I addressed it. So to start off with, Sarah, why don't you give us a challenge that you faced recently and how you overcome that?
Well, I had an interesting week because we've had the Body Matters Christmas party booked for 6 months, and we had a private function room booked for 20 people. And I found out over the course of the week, with less than a week's notice, that the venue was not going to be able to provide our Christmas party function anymore due to COVID restrictions. So I was really quite anxious and stressed for a couple of days, really, because I didn't really know what was going to happen. But basically what I did is to cope was to firstly just take a few deep breaths when I was feeling anxious about it. And then I did two things. So firstly, I went into problem solving mode to start to think about what the scenarios available to us would actually be. And thankfully it resolved itself naturally. The venue actually helped us find another location at the last minute, which was great. But also the other thing I did was thought challenging. So challenging the thoughts that I had about the worst case scenario. So for me, the worst case scenario was potentially not having a Christmas party at all, or not having a party at a venue that wasn't going to be very special for a Christmas party. And so I had thoughts like people won't enjoy themselves. And so I just used typical CBT, thought challenging techniques to myself to remind myself that everything would be okay. And it was. We had a great time.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear that it all worked out. I'm sure there's many places that probably had the same thing happen to them, because I know it's very hard to get into places now, especially with all the COVID restrictions. So why don't we just bump on into all the questions? So hi Sarah, welcome to your first Understanding Body Matters podcast on surviving Christmas just in time for the festive season to begin. So I thought to get the ball rolling, we'd start off with why Christmas is such an anxious time of year for those suffering from an eating disorder. I don't think many would consider why this is such a hard time for people, because it is such a joyful time of year. Why don't you start off with why it is very anxious for others?
Well, there's actually a lot of reasons why people with an eating disorder find Christmas particularly stressful. And when we think about it, there's so many things we can talk about, but I'd like to focus on the 5 F's: food, family, friends, fatness, and finishes. So the first one is food. Typically, Christmas can throw the spanner in the works when it comes to food. So people's food routine might be thrown out. There's also lots of additional challenges around food, typically for people who have eating disorders. So whether it's Christmas dinner or social events, finger food, which might cause confusion around plating up how much food, those sorts of questions. Of course, there's changes with brands that might be available and food shortages potentially as well. The second F is family. So we think of family typically, ideally, as being idyllic and happy and a source of support for people, but not everyone has that privilege. And even if people do have that privilege, for someone that's not well with an eating disorder, family dynamics and family tension can be very stressful and triggering potentially for people. So that's food and family. The third one is friends. So friends, again, a little bit like family. It can be ideally we choose our friends, but circumstances with friends might also be triggering around Christmas time. So it might be that someone's not invited to something that's upsetting, or people behave differently, or friends have other commitments. They might not be quite as available as normal because it's such a different time of year. The fourth thing is fatness. And by that I mean, I think with Christmas occurring in summer in Australia, it happens at a time when there's a lot more revelation of skin, I guess, and our body shapes. If our body shapes have changed over the course of the year, then suddenly it's around Christmas time that can become a lot more obvious for someone. So whether someone has put on weight or reduced weight as a result of their eating disorder, then that can be something that family and friends can be aware of, and also the person with the eating disorder can be aware of. And so that exposure in itself can be triggering. And finally, finishes. And so by what I mean by finishes is Christmas is typically, I guess, correlating with the end of the year. It's a time of endings for people as well. So it can be the end of school, it can be the end of uni, it can be the end of other things as well. So often Christmas can be a time where grief is experienced because of things which have occurred around Christmas for that particular person as well. So it's important to be sensitive around the fact that Christmas occurs at a time of year where people are typically already thinking about things in their life in a way that they might not normally do throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, and you did touch on things that can be triggering, especially around this time of year. Are there any other specific things that people should be aware of during this time, of like if they have any friends or families that are suffering from an eating disorder? What aspects can be triggering in their day-to-day life?
I think keeping in mind those 5 F's, the food, the family, the friends, the fatness, and the finishes, that all of those things in themselves can result in triggers for someone that has an eating disorder. So changes to routine, such as food and exercise, expectations of doing things differently. So, expectations that there might be a family brunch on, which might be the time that someone typically goes to the gym, that those things can be triggering. Another thing that's often very triggering is comments by family and friends. So people can be well-intentioned, but everything from the changes in body shape or size might trigger comments around how much food someone has put on their plate or not put on their plate. Any of those sorts of commentaries is typically unhelpful for someone that has an eating disorder. And then I think on top of all of those things, Christmas is a time where there's tremendously increased stress, and that can range from very real stresses such as financial stress buying presents, not working, because for a lot of people it means not getting paid as well. But also there's stress to have fun, stress to be happy, those sorts of stresses. And so for someone who isn't feeling that way, because it's very hard to have fun or be happy when you're consumed by thoughts around body shame or eating issues, then that stress is amplified again.
So how could someone help an individual with an eating disorder during this time? So family, friends, or even parents, especially with Christmas Day, how the day usually does evolve around the food and the plates that do come around.
It's a really great question. And I think to start with, it's about being sensitive and aware of the fact that Christmas can be very triggering. I think it might be instinctive to just think, have fun. It's just one day, everyone's together. Let's enjoy ourselves. But that would really undermine the level of pressure and stress that the person with the eating disorder could potentially be feeling. So being sensitive and aware that this might not be a normal Christmas for that person, that this might be a time that they're feeling different because they're not well. Talk to them ahead of time as much as possible about meals if this is helpful for them. Some people will find this really unhelpful, and a lot of people will find it helpful. And part of this depends on where someone's at in their recovery journey. So this sort of assumes that you've got an open dialogue with that person and you can actually have that critical conversation. But planning Christmas ahead of time and just sort of thinking about practical strategies of how to handle that particular day or other events that surround Christmas time. So a big stress for people often is if there's finger food, how much food do I put on my plate? Another big stress would be if there's dessert, should that person actually eat dessert and what's expected there? So think about some strategies to help support that person. Part of this might be also, and should be ideally, things that the person with the eating disorder is discussing already with their treatment team. So planning for Christmas, and potentially as someone who's supporting that person, you could ask them if they're happy for you to attend an appointment with their treatment team if you're not actually involved in treatment. So if you're if you're undertaking Maudsley family therapy, chances are that you're already involved in planning and preparing for Christmas, and that would be something that you'd be discussing. But if your loved one is older, or if they are experiencing more binge purge symptoms, then you may not be involved in their treatment at all. So asking to be included in their treatment team can be really helpful for planning for Christmas. And also the other thing is just ensuring that they have their appointments with their therapists booked in and that they have other backup resources around for them. So after Christmas is January, which of course can be quite stressful for people as well because of Christmas just passed and summer. And a lot of therapists go away. So making sure that they have the next few ones booked in for the Christmas period or after the Christmas period, whenever that actually is. And if the therapist is away, that there's a plan to manage that. So it might be seeing another therapist in the short term if that can be arranged. It might also be utilising other services such as the Butterfly Foundation. So knowing what their plan is around that general Christmas period can be helpful, and supporting them through surviving that.
Yeah, and just regarding support networks and how obviously a lot of practices do have a Christmas break where they aren't able to speak with their usual therapist in the meantime. I know there are practices that you did touch on, such as Butterfly Foundation. What other support networks do you think would be best to definitely contact during this work break so that they do have support and that their parents could even contact as well so they know how to address these issues even further?
This is a really great question, and the Butterfly Foundation is the first place that comes to mind, but there are a number of other services out there, and probably the easiest thing is for any of our listeners to download our Surviving Christmas Safety Plan, which is on our website, which has got a list of services available that people can access and the hours that they're open, because some services do close down at Christmas time. So I'd encourage people to download that from our website. The other thing is, if your psychologist is away, looking at other support systems that are in place. So increasing sessions with the GP if they're available, or the dietitian if the dietitian is available. So looking and discovering who on the treatment team actually is available for this Christmas period, and making sure that there's regular appointments with those clinicians through that time. The other thing I'd say in terms of support networks is Christmas can be overwhelming because when for someone with an eating disorder going into that period, they can really feel very exposed, that they don't have support systems around them, or that those support systems that they do have disappear. And so what I'd really encourage anyone to do is try and use this as an opportunity to build resources around that. So this might mean actually trying different charities like the Butterfly Foundation if you haven't used any of their services before, and it might mean reaching out to friends or family members in a way that hasn't been done in the past as well. So I think the silver lining is that if Christmas means that you can add some more people in your cheer squad to support you through recovery. So in addition to those things, what I would encourage anyone to do, this is people who are suffering from eating issues, but also families and friends, is check out our website. We have, over the years, compiled a number of different resources for people at Christmas time in terms of tips and ideas. And this involves some of our expertise within our team at BodyMatters, but also reaching out to other people we know who do some amazing work in supporting people with eating disorders. And so if you check out our most recent blog, it includes our Christmas survival plan, but it also includes some hyperlinks to some of the blogs that we've completed in the past about how you can survive Christmas.
I do know that a lot of those blog posts that were posted regarding Christmas time have helped a lot of our clients over the years, especially parents. So we'll definitely link that in the description below for you to have a look and check that out. But thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us for this Surviving Christmas episode. I have no doubt that this will definitely help a lot of people struggling during this time, and hopefully it'll provide some insight for others who might know someone with an eating disorder but haven't really had the courage to address it properly yet. So we can't wait to have you on board for our next episode, but stay tuned for our next episode in 2 weeks' time, which will be our recovery talk with Sophie Smith. She'll be going really personal with you all about her personal journey and where she's at now and how she overcome her treatment, triggers, and a lot of more personal things that we are really grateful that she was able to hit so deep with. So we'll see you soon. As always, don't forget to check out our website at www.bodymatters.com.au to check out more of our services, and follow us on Spotify, iTunes to ensure that you don't miss an episode.